In British Columbia, the police punish people on the basis of the results of a roadside breathalyzer test. So you can provide a sample that's over a legal limit and end up with some punishment, or the police may allege that you refuse to provide a sample. In other words, they may say that you just outright said, "I'm not going to blow." That leads to a 90-day driving prohibition. But in many circumstances, people attempt to provide a sample. They put their lips on the device and they participate in the process, and the police officer comes to the conclusion, says they weren't trying to blow. Now, the devices all will accept a sample automatically if enough airflow goes through. So that is a threshold that is set. And the concern that we've got is anytime a person doesn't meet that threshold, doesn't have that blowing pattern that particularly works for that particular device, the police officer will just conclude that the person is refusing and issue them a 90-day driving prohibition. And we see lots of cases where people, in my view, are factually innocent. Look at the woman in Alberta who had the 2 broken ribs and found out about it after the fact, couldn't do anything about it. In BC, there's been numerous seniors and people with disabilities. I had a case years ago where my client had polio as a child, couldn't meet the parameters of that device to trigger automatic sampling of it, and I had to go to court for him to be exonerated. And this is a significant portion of the population have some reason that they can't. It's because it's their body just doesn't allow it, and in the circumstances it might be their mental situation won't allow it, so a mental disorder or something like that. But for automatic triggering, you've got to get a bunch of air going through it. Now, you would expect that if this was a fair system, that when they used one type of breathalyzer and switched to another type of breathalyzer and switched to another type of breathalyzer, the numbers across the board should be about the same, because human behavior is not going to change, right? It's only an issue of whether or not the device is actually doing something different. It can be training, okay, but usually it's an issue of whether or not the device is good for that person, in other words. And we noticed when the Alcosensor FST was introduced in British Columbia that there was a spike in refusal cases, and in fact refusal cases are up overall as a result of the device that the police chose to use. And when they introduced that same device in Alberta, they used to use the Intoxilyzer 400D, they replaced it with the Alcosensor FST. Alberta lawyers were phoning me saying, what's with all the refusals we've got now? And I told them, like, it's fairly obvious that it is the device. It is the device. Now, a significant portion of the population cannot meet the parameters of that device. It's not been properly studied. There's only one study that I found out of England, because there's in many states you can refuse in the US. This has not been researched in the US. It's different from state to state. You can refuse in Texas, I understand, but you can't in Alaska. There's not the same population in Alaska, so this has not been something that's been properly researched. The only study that I've been able to find out there is from a study that was conducted in England. And what did they find? They found that some healthy adults, many of them, cannot meet the parameters of the instruments. Those are the bigger instruments, bigger devices, but they don't require more air. They're just better, supposedly, right? So the manufacturers claim. But the point is, a significant portion of the healthy population cannot meet the parameters of those devices. Now, going back to the point that I made before, when they introduced this new device, we saw the numbers go up, and the numbers have been consistently gone up since then. There's been a steady difference between the old device and the new device. And we're soon to see another new device come out. They're going to replace the Alcosensor FST with the Draeger 6000. And I've used that device, and I think it might be easier to provide a sample on that. So I suspect, and this is a good thing, obviously, that we're going to see refusals go down. But, okay, will anybody reflect on that? Did anybody reflect on it when they saw refusals go up? Excuse me, when the Alcosensor FST was introduced. Did any judges, prosecutors, police officers, the superintendent of motor vehicles, those adjudicators who adjudicate those cases at the superintendent of motor vehicles, are any of them going to reflect on the fact that quite clearly the device is the issue for many people, and that thousands of people in British Columbia, thousands of people have faced the consequences of an IRP, and in Alberta and in other locations where they punish people with refusals of the basis of a roadside breath tester interaction? Will any of those people, judges, police officers, stop and think and reflect for a moment on the number of people who've been wrongly punished, the number of people who have been punished because the device? Now, I want to tell you a few other things about it. In the training manual for this device, it does not contemplate physical disabilities. It does not contemplate the fact that as people age, it becomes harder for them to meet the parameters of the device. People of small stature, people who just are different, people who can have a mental disability that can impede their capacity to be able to breathe at that time, for the police officer at that time. Will any of those people think about all of those thousands of individuals who have faced this circumstance of a refusal case? It is systemic discrimination because the training does not discuss the fact that some people can't meet the parameters of the device. I, in 25 years, have never had somebody contact me or a police officer tell me that they were dealing with somebody and they concluded that that person couldn't meet the parameters of the device. They couldn't do it because of a physical reason. Everybody who doesn't get that device to automatically accept a sample in BC ends up with a refusal allegation, so an IRP or a criminal charge. And despite that, we know that it's different from device to device. So you have to assume that a significant portion of those people are going to be only punished because of the decision of using that device and not properly training people. And that, to me, is actual systemic discrimination. It is discrimination on the basis of age. It is discrimination on the basis of your physical characteristics, or in some circumstances, a mental issue. And it's never been addressed. And in the one article, they talk about the arrogant assumptions in the justice system about refusals. And I see it all over the place. Judges, prosecutors, the superintendent of motor vehicles, the adjudicators of the superintendent of motor vehicles, who work backwards to uphold decisions by trying to find some way to reject a person's evidence for reasons that most people would never agree with, but the court has to defer to. They exploit that aspect of our justice system, that findings of fact are deferred to. Will any of those people reflect on the fact that they will have upheld dozens, hundreds of IRPs where people simply wouldn't have got that if it weren't for the fact of a particular device that was used, and if it weren't for the fact that police officers are not trained to deal with recognize that some people cannot meet the parameters of the device for physical, mental, whatever reasons, age, whatever. When that new device is introduced, will anybody stop and think about it? Will any of those people put in the thought? Will the superintendent of motor vehicles go back and say, you know what, wow, look at the numbers have changed. We could see it from this device to this device, now this device. Should we take all of these driving prohibitions off people's driving records at a bare minimum? No, nobody's going to do that. It's upsetting for me to see that other people are not going to do it. But what is also upsetting for me is I feel complicit. I have been trying, but I have not succeeded in leading to a change in the training for the police for that. I have for other things where you wouldn't be happy about it because the police were just trained to figure out other ways to deceive or lie or get away with something. Or to hide some evidence. But I feel that, I feel like I am complicit in it because I argue these cases. I succeed in a number of them, but also those people shouldn't be there in the first place if I could have persuaded somebody. And there are people who have asked me about it. In fact, the Solicitor General in British Columbia, I met him at a social event and he asked me about it. And I said, call me up and I'll lay it all out for you. This particular concern that some people with just can't meet the parameters of the device, but that never happened. And I don't think anybody's going to stop and reflect on it, and this is probably this TikTok is probably the most detailed discussion that ever will exist on it. But it's terrible. It's just a terrible thing because a lot of people end up wrongfully punished, and there's nothing worse than being wrongfully accused. Except having being wrongfully accused and then having a court or tribunal say that your wrongfully accusation of being guilty is in fact that you're guilty. That's a very painful thing for a human to go through, and unfortunately doesn't seem to be something that people think about a whole lot who are actually the ones who are handing out that punishment or making those accusations and governing it.